I'll try to think of another one, but this is out of left field. But Derrick Henry, NFL MVP.
Whoa.
Like,
dude, there's no more dominant player on the field right now. Like, can you
I kind of think so. I mean, to do what he's doing when everybody knows that when he's on the field, he's getting the ball. I mean, he's not playing a gazillion percent of snaps. He's playing like 60% of the snaps, 50 or 60% of the snaps, I think.
Which is even crazier because when he's in, they know he's getting the ball and it doesn't matter.
Exactly. It doesn't matter. He's playing between 50 and 65% of the snaps, basically. He's got over 130 yards in half of his games. He's got touchdowns in every single game. That's what, eight on the year. He's in the top 10 at running back in 5 of 6 weeks. He's got over 25 fantasy points in 3 of 6. He's got over 10 in every single game. I mean, to your point, like if you're saying you draft him as a top 5 fantasy pick, like I feel like he should be in the running for NFL MVP at this point. I mean, the last time a running back won MVP was 2012, Adrian Peterson, age 27. I mean, Derrick Henry's 30, so that's.
Well, 30 is usually the drop off, but now it's not with him. Next week, my bold prediction is that Cooper has his season high in yards and he catches a touchdown.
Wow.
Against Tennessee, very suspect team. I think they're going to, really want to feed him the ball like they should have with Cleveland. He's very talented. He doesn't complain. I haven't heard anything out of Amari Cooper, really. Not a diva, just gets in there and works. So I believe that they're going to feature him heavily, and he has something to prove here that he's not done. At age 30, that's when, wide receivers start to fall off a little bit. I think that he's going to have a big game in his debut against the Bills, or against Tennessee. Season high in yards and 1 touchdown is my bold prediction for next week. Oh man, I love fantasy football. Let me go see if my team won this week. Lowest points out of everyone? Fuck! My name is Adam Jackson, owner and manager of the Union Bridge Barracudas. There comes a time in every manager's life when the team that they created by their own hand do not live up to expectations. This time of failure was this week for me. This week, my own squad scored a league-low 54.84 points against the Westminster Wonder Boys. In line with the bylaws of the Beltway Wars Invitational, my shotgun punishment awaits me. May the fantasy gods bless me and keep me from having to do this punishment ever again.
You are listening to the Beltway Wars Invitational Podcast, hosted by Adam Jackson and Patrick Wilton. Enjoy the show.
Welcome back to the Beltway Wars Invitational Podcast with your hosts, as always, Adam Jackson and Patrick Wilton, going over the Week 7 matchups, winners and losers, people with hope, people with no hope, that'd be me. A lot of great matchups here, a lot of blowouts actually, really, some close ones, but a lot of blowouts here. Pat, anything that took that you took away from for week 7?
Other than me remaining in first place and winning the rematch of last year's championship against Jake, that's what stands out to me. We'll get into it with the rest of this, but hey, I mean, you've got a lot of the teams that I think we were high on in the draft recap show that are close to the top of the league. Some teams that are putting up a lot of points. We'll talk about Tom's team first here coming up, and he was one of the three A's that I gave out in addition to Brian and myself. So of those three teams, all three of those teams are, I think, currently in playoff contention and playing very well. So yeah, I think if we went back right now and looked at our draft recap show, I think we're doing fairly well, kind of
What
just
grade
all
did you give
things
me?
considered. It was probably a B plus, but you've had some extenuating circumstances as we talked about. But
Okay, well, enough
I mean,
self
number
pity.
one, McCaffrey, by the way, like McCaffrey. So like, I was actually thinking about this driving into work today. The duck race is like what doomed your season. Like that dreaded duck race that you were like in 12th, and then with like 5 seconds to go, your little duck went all the way out in front, and then that led to Christian McCaffrey, and that led to maybe the a prognosticator for the rest of your season. It just
Yeah,
hasn't worked out.
it's like I used all of my fantasy karma with the duck race, and now I have
Yeah, to
nothing
win the
left.
duck race. Yeah,
but
there's a lesson in there.
I like that I'm blaming the ducks instead of myself. So I will take that any day. So let's get started here. We got a long show ahead of us, so let's get started with our first matchup of week 7. That'd be the Finksburg Freaks, 161.86, 4-3 on the season. Defeating the Pasadena Plague, 86.02, now 4-3 on the season. One of our most lopsided matchups, almost an 80-point victory for Tom. Looking at his roster, Patrick Mahomes starting off here, the worst one on the team, really. Only a measly 12 points. His actual worst game of the season thus far. Still trying to get that elusive 20-point game out of Patrick Mahomes. Not in this one against
17-point game. 17-point game.
Yeah.
Like even a 17-point game. Like 16.3 is the highest. So
Wait, I'm going back here. His last 20-point game was in week 12 of last year, and that was a 20.82 against the Las Vegas Raiders. But enough to harp on that. We got a lot of good news for Tom here. Brees Hall, 12 carries, 38 yards, and a touchdown, but very much involved in the passing attack against Pittsburgh. 6 for 9, 103 yards to the air. Really showing that certified number 1 running back there in New York. Drafting him in the middle of the round seems like it was a good pickup. Now is running back number 7 on the season. Alexander Madison, he starts him here, 23 carries, 92 yards. Very quietly becoming a low end running back 2, now running back number 21 on the season. DK Metcalf does have some injury concerns, but does do well in this one. 4 for 7, 99 yards and a touchdown. He is questionable, considered week to week, so that is something that Tom will have to deal with in the upcoming weeks. Brian Thompson Jr., 5 for 5, 89 and a touchdown over there in, was it Germany? I think they played in Germany. Not Germany, or was London?
it was
London.
It was London. Yeah,
Okay.
maybe.
I think they're playing in Germany next week. Somebody is. T. Higgins, 4 for 8, 82 yards and a touchdown. Mark Andrews, 4 for 4, 41 and 2 touchdowns. Xavier Worthy had, compared to the rest of Tom's team, had a down day, 3 for 8, 19 yards. Kicker gets 17, and Washington's defense gets 20 points against Carolina. Looking at his bench, he had a couple buys here and a couple outs. Travis Etienne was out of this one. Tyler Kraft does catch a touchdown, and he sits the San Francisco defense. With Tom's team, my goodness, other than Patrick Mahomes and the starting quarterback, I mean, really strong squad. And, the one person I do want to talk about here is the resurgence of Mark Andrews. Now with, his 3rd touchdown on the season, catching 2 in this one. Seems like that he's back to that number 1 tight end territory that you can trust him week in and week out.
Yeah, I mean it's still a little bit hard to trust for me. I mean, I've got him in another league, so I'm having these kind of internal conversations, but still just 4 targets. I mean, his high on the season is 5. He obviously has back-to-back, you know, double-digit fantasy point games in these last 2 weeks because he's catching touchdowns, but still 4 targets in both of those games, and only playing about 50% of the snaps. So just because of the amount of weapons that the Ravens have, it's still a little bit concerning for me. But you certainly love getting the 2 touchdowns. That's 3 in 2 games for Mark. Good to see that. But I'm looking at resurgence from a couple of these other guys. I'm looking at a resurgence from Alexander Madison.
Yeah.
23 carries, gets into the end zone. Obviously, very clearly now the lead back in the Raiders offense. A Raiders offense that has lost their star playmaker in Devontae Adams. He now has back-to-back games over 13 fantasy points, against Pittsburgh last week, a good defense, and against the Rams, who have a decent defense, on 23 carries this week, 92 yards. So looking good there. T. Higgins, a guy, 4 for 8, not very efficient, but now has 3 straight games over 10 fantasy points. 8 targets in this one, 7 last week, and 14 the week before, and 10 the week before that. So that offense in Cincinnati is starting to look good. They're playing out of their early season funk, and I'm really liking what I'm seeing there. And then you mentioned Brian Thomas, the rookie. We talk about how Tom has taken chances on some rookie wide receivers. He's got Thomas there, and he's got the possibility of a guy like Xavier Worthy. Now that, the Chiefs keep losing people every week.
Yeah.
This week they lose Juju Smith-Schuster with a hamstring early in that game. All reports seem to indicate that he'll miss next week. So Xavier Worthy could be a sneaky start for Tom next week. The one question that I have for you, Adam, here is Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, well, I kind of wanted to stay away from him because we talk about it every week, but go ahead.
Well, it's important to talk about him this week because he's playing the Raiders.
Yep.
But Tom on IR has Tua Tagovailoa, who, if he returns this week, will have a juicy matchup against the Arizona Cardinals, one of the best teams for quarterbacks in terms of fantasy point scoring. Are you starting Tua Tagovailoa in his first game back against the Cardinals over Mahomes against the Raiders?
I'm going to go another direction. I think I'm starting Caleb Williams over Patrick Mahomes.
Oh, that's right.
He does have him there. Now, it is a sneaky pickup to try to pick up Tua. It's a good little stash to have, but you kind of want to see how he looks in his first game. I know it is a good matchup, but Caleb Williams has a good matchup as well. He's going against Washington here, who, as we know, doesn't have a great defense. They should be in this one with Jane Daniels missing a couple weeks. It looks like week to week. So right now, I think you're going with Caleb Williams, just the way that, that way before the bye, how their offense was humming along. They get 2 weeks to prepare for Washington now. I think you're going with Caleb Williams over Tua and Patrick Mahomes. It's weird because it's like Patrick Mahomes, he's not going to have one of these like horrible games, like like a 5 or 6 point game. It seems like he's always going to be around that 12 to 15 point kind of round or kind of area. So that's just kind of my thinking, is that if you want to go boom or bust, go with Caleb Williams. If you want to be a little more safe, go with Patrick Mahomes. But right now, I think I'm going with Caleb Williams against Washington in Week 8.
All right, here's my bold prediction.
All right.
Top of the show. One of them. Just go for it. Pat Mahomes against the Raiders will have his first 20-point fantasy game since week 12 of last year.
Okay.
I just think it's gone on too long. I think people are starting to sleep on him. I think that the talk is that the Chiefs are maybe not so good. They've lost a lot of weapons. I think Mahomes is due for a huge superstar game where he proves that he is still a good fantasy quarterback and a good, obviously has always been thought of as a good NFL quarterback, but I think he reestablishes himself to fantasy teams that he can be a viable starter. So 20 points.
All right, so that timestamp is 10 minutes, and just keep a note that for me, please. So you're saying 20 points for Patrick Mahomes. Now, the Raiders do play him historically pretty hard. I know that the Raiders have beat them in the past. It's kind of one of those weird things. Let's look at last year. He did score 20 points against the Raiders and did score 16 in week 16. So interesting. Just with the lack of weapons, that's very interesting, bold prediction. But let's go over to Josh's squad here. Goes to 4-3 on the season. Starts Trevor Lawrence here. Had Anthony Richardson on the bench and Joe Flacco. Joe Flacco not starting with Anthony Richardson starting. Does do the correct decision there, but Trevor Lawrence goes 15 to 20, 193 yards, a touchdown. That's fine, but nothing that's going to carry you over to a victory. Devin Singletary, I think that he's lost his job. And I don't know. I'm looking at the snap count right. Yeah, 21% snaps. Seems like Tracy has that job as of right now. So that is something to be concerned for Josh, and the many things to be concerned with Josh. Najee Harris, 21 carries, 101 yards, and a touchdown against a very tough Jets defense. So does well there. Chris Godwin, why is he out there? I have no idea. The Ravens pulled their starters. He's out there. Gets hurt on one of the final plays of the game. Looks to be out for the year. I don't know if you saw a video of that injury. It was not good, but does go 7 for 9, 65 yards. So it looks like Chris Godwin's going to be out for the season. Also, another person out for the season, confirmed, is Brandon Ayuk, 2 for 6, 23 yards. Torn ACL, MCL, so he is out. So his top two options right now are out for the season. Wan'Dale Robinson, 6 for 9, 23 yards. You like the 9 targets, but it's nothing really doing. When Daniel Jones plays bad, everyone suffers in that Giants offense, including the wide receivers. George Kittle, 6 for 7, 92 yards as well. Has a good game. Romeo Doubs, kind of a resurgence. He's picking his, he's kind of getting his role there in that Packers offense. It seems like it's Wicks, him, and the guy we always talk about, Jalen Reed.
Watson. And Watson, all 4 of them. I mean, from week to week, any of those guys, this is our big concern coming into the season about the Packers receiving corps. Any week, any of those guys can be relevant.
Well, I would say that the last 2 weeks, 18 points, 13 points. So it does seem like he's carving out some sort of a role. Jordan Love is looking for him. So you like the 10 targets there. Buckert has 4 points, and the Chargers have 4 points. Looking at his bench, Justice Hill has a good game, catches a nice screen pass for a touchdown, but other than that, nothing really happening. He has Isaiah Pacheco out. Goodson, 14 carries, 51 yards and a touchdown, and also carrying 2 kickers. So just a tough week for Josh, not just going against the league leading scorer, but now you have concerns in 3 areas, with Devin Singletary losing his job, Chris Godwin being out for the year, and Brandon Ayuk also missing the rest of the season.
Yeah, and add that to the fact that he's got Puka Nacua still on IR. Add that to the fact that he's got Pacheco on IR. Well, in NFL, only one IR spot in the league, so he's got Pacheco languishing on the bench, and will not have. We'll only have 2 healthy wide receivers on this team next week. So going to need to make a move. It's going to be Wan'Dale Robinson and Romeo Doubs in the lineup for sure. But there are no other healthy wide receivers on this team, at least for the next couple weeks until Nacua potentially comes back. So going to need to make some moves here. Half-point PPR league, there's some advantages maybe of starting a wide receiver if you've got one in the flex, but don't know that that's going to be an opportunity for Josh right now. May end up having to slot Justice Hill in there and hoping that he can have be involved in the offense as he was to some degree this week. So yeah, it's tough sledding. Things not looking good for Josh right now, given all of the injuries. Is 4-3, but currently because of the sort of logjam at 4-3, he is number 8. So he is the first team out of the playoffs at this point. So difficult to sustain injuries to Godwin and Ayuk. Godwin has just been playing out of his mind, even with Evans. Could you have imagined how valuable he would be if he was healthy and Evans was going to miss a few weeks with this, what seems to be quite a bad hamstring injury? Godwin would be a top 5 starter for you at the wide receiver position.
He was a top 5.
Sucks all around.
It was a top 5 with Evans. He's the number 2 ranked wide receiver right now. So, yeah, the sky could have been the limit. And, we talked about it during the draft. Our biggest question mark was Brandon Ayuk. Just what a lost season. Like, just, comes into camp late, drops a lot of passes, only has one good game on the season, and now is out for the year. Just, just a really lost season. I think he was picked at the end of the second round, I believe, or end of the third. I'm not really sure. But, just a really...
Who,
really,
Ayuk?
Yes.
End of the third round.
Yeah, so just a really just awful season. You look to get back on track in 2025, but it's just really hard. You're hoping that Nakua is going to be back, if not next week, the week after, so you can just slot him in. But yeah, it's just rough. And at 4-3, questions at I would say you have questions at quarterback, you have questions at the first running back spot, and now you have 2 question marks at wide receiver who you're going to play. It's just a lot of question marks when you're barely hanging on to a potential playoff spot anyway. So just not good news there for Josh.
But, yeah, and I would say, potentially question at the second running back spot. As good of a day as Najee Harris had, 21 carries, 102 yards, and a touchdown. Jaylen Warren actually played, they basically split the workload, and Jaylen Warren looked pretty good in this one. For under 50% of snaps for Harris in 2 straight weeks. That offense, looking like it's changing a little bit, potentially with Russell Wilson under center. So I would venture a guess to say he's got questions with just about everybody on this team right now. Except for maybe Harrison Butker and George Kittle. That's about as sure of a thing as you've got, which spells trouble.
Yeah, it's just hard, but still 4-3, still has a shot at this. Maybe, maybe he can make a trade. I don't know who you're really trading on this team, to be honest with you. But maybe some dart throws in terms of running backs. Who knows? But still 500, and it just doesn't look great for Josh after week 7 as of right now, as it stands. But let's go over to our next matchup, and that's going to be Dustin here. Dustin's Pink Pony Club goes to 4-3 with a 148.14 win over the Orchard Beach Ovaries, 83.56. 4-3 as well. So we have a couple of 4-3 teams here. Let's start with Dustin's squad. Lamar Jackson, my goodness. I know you said last week that Derrick Henry, your bold prediction was Derrick Henry would be the MVP of the season. If Jackson continues to have his numbers that he's having and projected to have,
it could be 1-2.
It could be 1-2. I think I saw the projection as Lamar Jackson right now is projected to have 36 touchdown passes and 5 interceptions. If he does that, or even has, single-digit interceptions and runs for 800 yards, there's no way he cannot have the MVP. But scores 34 points in this one, 17 of 22, 281 yards, 5 touchdowns. Does also run for 52 yards as well. Certified number 1 quarterback, no question about it. Number 1 quarterback, number 1 player overall in fantasy football right now. Kenneth Walker has a nice day here, 14 carries, 69 yards and a touchdown. Also catches a touchdown for 24 yards through the air. Ramondre Stevenson, just a bad New England offense. Only has 7 carries, 18 yards, 2 for 3, 7 yards. I think that's the biggest thing about Stevenson is that, he would have these sort of rushing days, but he would really supplement it and raise his floor by the receiving work, and he's just not getting it here. I think that has a little bit to do with Drake May. Just, instead of dropping it off, he runs for it. He's an athletic quarterback, so I think that kind of lowers Stevenson's floor even more than what it usually was in past seasons. Justin Jefferson, 7 for 8, 81 yards, touchdown. Probably the most consistent wide receiver in fantasy football right now. He's always around that 80, 90-yard mark and scored a touchdown in his first 6 games out of 7. So very, 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 very consistent there. Drake London as well has a nice day, 6 for 8, 63 yards and a touchdown. Cortland Sutton played the entire game, but has a big old 0 there, so that's something to be, I guess, looked at a little bit. Brock Bowers, 10 for 14, 93 yards. As you were saying, Devontae Adams being out of there. Who's the other pass catcher? It seems to be him. 14 targets. You love to see that. Gardner Minshew's looking for him. and O'Connell, I think, is going to be out for a little bit. So you'd like to see that rapport with Gardner Minshew and Bowers. Starts Michael Wilson here, 1 for 3, 15 yards. Cameron Dicker the kicker, 22 points. And Cincinnati's defense also scores 16 against Cleveland. Looking on his bench, as we mentioned last week, ton of people on bye. You had Swift, Adunze, and Keenan Allen on bye. Aaron Rodgers really did nothing, and Braylon Allen is reduced to his secondary role there in New York. But, what's the biggest question mark here? I mean, it's just strength all around. Maybe that wide receiver 3 flex position, but that's going to be supplemented with, Swift and Allen going forward.
Yeah, Dustin is really manifesting the lyrics of Pink Pony Club here at the end when they go, I'm going to keep on dancing. I'm going to keep on dancing. Dustin is going to keep on dancing if his team continues to perform like this. A solid day. He has been one of the quickest risers in terms of teams in this league right now. Lamar Jackson, you mentioned playing out of his mind. Kenneth Walker, all the guys that you expect to perform are performing for Dustin. And, to the opposite of Josh's team, I mean, Dustin's squad here is solid across the board. There really are not a ton of weaknesses. Quarterback, Lamar Jackson, the number 1 quarterback in fantasy. Running back position, Kenneth Walker, number 8. Wide receivers, Jefferson, number 4. Drake London, number 3. Brock Bowers at tight end, number 2. So, you love having high-end weapons at every position, as Dustin does. That's what you aim for. This is a totally balanced team right now. And that's not even to talk about DeAndre Swift, who, has been playing like a basically a top 5 running back over his last 3 weeks. After starting the season rough, he's gone 26, 19, 19 the last 3 games, and has some juicy matchups coming up against teams that have not defended the run very well. So things lining up really nicely here. I'm not too worried about the Cortland Sutton issue there. I think Dustin has a few guys that he can put in there, whether it's Keenan Allen, who's maybe going to have a chance at being a little bit more relevant with Caleb Williams playing the way he's been playing, whether it's DeAndre Swift, who obviously you need to get him in the lineup every week, coming back from his bye. And Adam Thielen is kind of an interesting name on IR that I just want to mention because we haven't seen him play with Andy Dalton, and I feel like those are 2 veteran wide receivers that could, if Thielen comes back and plays for Carolina, he could sort of be a sneaky name to keep your eyes on. And that's not even to wonder whether or not they may trade him in the trade deadline in 2 weeks. That's a guy on a veteran contract who, that if the Panthers can get something for him, may try to deal him to somebody who needs that veteran presence as they enter the playoff run. So, totally deep team. I agree. I don't know that there's too much more to say.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll do a. Whoa, I hear myself. Hold on. Okay. Yeah, I'm good now. I guess a season-long prediction. I don't know if it's bold anymore, but I think Brock Bowers finishes the season as the number 1 overall tight end in scoring.
Basically been there.
Yeah, I mean, just the targets. I mean, past 3 games, over 10 targets. Now with Devontae Adams being gone, I just think that we could see for the first time, maybe ever, a rookie tight end finish as the number 1 ranked tight end overall in fantasy. And I'll say this, Dustin saw something that we didn't, because I say this every week, but he fell in that draft, as you remember. And really reaping the rewards of trusting in a rookie tight end when no one else did. So Dustin goes to 4-3, 148. So he is in good position for the rest of the season, it seems, as long as his players can stay healthy, as always.
But let's just to add to Bowers, only according to the red-green, the matchups, 2 matchups that are on the red side of 50-50 there. So Miami in week 11 and the Chargers doesn't matter in week 18. We won't be playing anyway. So the rest of those matchups are green. So green lights all along the runway for Dustin and Bowers. Dustin is the team that I think I might be most worried about right now in the league. He's just so balanced.
Yeah, I think he's kind of matchup proof. just because of the amount of work he's getting. Um, I just think that he's a vital part of that offense. He's the number one option in that passing attack, and I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. So um, I wouldn't even worry about the matchups. You're playing him every week anyway, so I would say it doesn't really matter. But let's go over to Sarah's team. Now goes to 4-3 on the season. Jalen Hurts, 10 for 14, only 14 pass attempts here. Didn't really need to do it as Saquon went crazy against that Giants defense. 114 yards, a touchdown. Does have 2 rushing touchdowns on the day. I think there were 2 tush pushes there, so like to see that. Dan Montgomery, 9 carries, 31 yards, 3 for 4, 39. Does lose a fumble and is questionable here. Dealing with a contusion, so just a bruise. So probably nothing too long term. Chase Brown, who you traded to her, 15 carries, 44 yards. Like the work. Snap count is also good, still around 60% as well. So probably better days ahead for Chase Brown, just too talented of a player. Plays at Ladd McConkey here, 5 for 7, 46 yards. Stephon Diggs, 5 for 7, 23 yards. George Pickens, his first game with Russell Wilson now. Remember I said this last week. He would be the main beneficiary if Russell Wilson was starting. And, off to a good start so far. 5 for 9, 111 yards, and a touchdown, 19 points there. Evan Ingram, 5 for 5, 35 yards. Devin Achane coming back from the concussion. 15 carries, 77 yards. You're not worried about him at all. I wouldn't imagine, especially with Tua coming back now, that changes that entire offense. He is a top 10 option probably every week. Evan McPherson, 3 points, and Jets with a -2. On the bench, Baker Mayfield, continue to do Baker Mayfield things. 27 points, 31 for 45, 373 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. A lot of people on bye. CeeDee Lamb, Cole Kmet, Tyjae Spears was out of this one. So, 4-3 does lose a bad one here, but I'm not too concerned really, especially with the resurgence of George Pickens with Russell Wilson, I'm guessing starting next week as well. Devin Achane coming back. Just a very talented roster, and should have better days ahead, better weeks ahead for Sarah.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. We're thinking much the same way here because, look, you hate to lose it for sure, but, if there's going to be a week that David Montgomery has his worst week of the season, if there's going to be a week that Diggs has his worst game of the season, if you're going to have a week that the Jets defense scores -2 fantasy points for you, it may as well be in a week that you've got CeeDee Lamb, your best player, your number 1 pick, on a bye in this one. We knew it was going to be a challenge coming into this game with CeeDee Lamb on bye for Sarah to find production elsewhere on her roster. So I guess, you're just hoping, if you're Sarah, that was kind of the one-off for a few of those guys I just named, and that they'll be back, and as you mentioned, that Achane will be back to efficient and scoring, and that the Miami offense will be vastly different than it's been without Tua. You hope that Evan Engram, the 5 for 5, is nice to see. He finally may be healthy here, plays just 56% of the snaps. You hope that goes up. But certainly, a good matchup against the Packers, who give up some points to tight ends next week. So, I think signs are still good for Sarah. The Jets defense, one of the best in the league, but is a little bit injured right now. Thus, the 37 points allowed to Pittsburgh. No other defensive options there at the DST position, and not a whole lot of depth at the skill positions. Chandler, just 2 carries there in Minnesota. As long as Aaron Jones is healthy, he's not touching the field. Tyjae Spears, I guess, left this game.
No, he was out of this game.
He's been out for a few weeks.
Only
maybe
last
just 1 week. I guess
Yeah.
left last week's game. And Pollard has just been playing super well. So not a lot of depth here. But I still think Sarah's got a playoff-worthy team right now.
For sure. Just too much talent, I would say. You have CeeDee Lamb coming back this week from bye. Lamb, Diggs, and Pickens now. That's a deadly trio of wide receivers. Chase Brown's going to have better days. As long as Dave Montgomery's still in there, you still have Devin Achane. You can slot him in, I suppose. Just a very talented roster, I would say. And, you like to see Jalen Hurts now getting involved in that red zone again. I don't think we saw that too much yet. Just seeing how many. He had 2 rushing touchdowns before this. He matches his season total in week 7. I think you're going to see more of that. Him running the ball when they get on the goal line. So, bad week, I would say 83 points, but future's looking bright, I would say. Very talented team, definitely poised to make the playoffs.
Question for you here.
Okay.
Pickens, good call by you. His value would shoot
One of my few.
Russell Wilson. Is George Pickens a top 12 receiver the rest of the way? Just before you answer, I'm trying to convince you. He's had 7 or more targets in every game this season but one, including 9 this week with Russell Wilson. He's on bye in week 9, but after his bye, he has beatable defenses including Washington, Baltimore, Cleveland, Cincinnati, Cleveland, Philadelphia a little bit tougher, and then Baltimore again. Green for the next 5-6 weeks.
The only thing
Top 12?
I would say like 12 if I was to put him in there. Here's the thing. I think the Steelers still want to run the ball. I don't know how many opportunities he's going to get. He doesn't have anyone else, so I'm kind of just thinking out loud here. Doesn't have anybody else competing for targets, maybe Freiermuth, but Freiermuth kind of is what he is. Doesn't have competing at targets, which can be a good and bad thing. He's going to be the focal point for any secondary to try to stop him. Russell Wilson is a competent NFL quarterback in this stage of his career. I'm saying top 12 is probably the ceiling. I'm not convinced about that Pittsburgh offense. I know they scored 37 points here, but I'm not convinced yet. I think it's going to be good. Like I said, I think it's going to be much better. But I just think that they have a real commitment to running the ball, and I think that's going to limit his opportunities. Now, again, on the flip side here, I think that their defense is good enough that they're going to be in all these games. So there's not ever really going to be a negative game script involved. They're not that good. Their record's 5-2, but I don't feel like they're the 5-2 record. Like, they're not dominating these teams. So, 12, 13, that's kind of where I put them for the rest of the season. But let's go. Go ahead. Nothing else? All right.
No.
All right, let's go over to our next matchup, and that would be Alex here. Now 2-5.
Upset special.
137.04 to 125 for the Conkersville Conks. Now Alex is 2-5. Brian is 4-3. Looking at his starting lineup here, C.J. Stroud, horrible day, 10 for 21, 86 yards, 5 carries for 19, only 5 points in this one. Didn't really matter though. Dan Montgomery leaves this one. Jamar Gibbs picks up where he left off. 15 carries, 16 yards, 2 touchdowns, 4 for 4, 44 yards to the air. Kareem Hunt, 22 carries, 78 yards, and 2 touchdowns. What a find for Alex here. I'm trying to see when he picked him up. Picked him up off waivers. $17. Getting the bulk of the carries there. I don't see that changing at all until Isaiah Pacheco comes back, which is going to be a couple more weeks. So Alex really found a gem there in Kansas City. Darnell Mooney, 5 for 8, 46 yards. Amon-Ra St. Brown, 8 for 8, 112, and a touchdown. Zay Flowers, not really involved in this one and is questionable. I'm going to see what that's about. Seems like there's no information on that, but not really involved in this one. David Njoku, though, 10 for 14, 76 yards and a touchdown. Be interesting to see how that dynamic changes. We're talking about quarterback changes. I guess we're assuming that it's going to be Jameis Winston going forward there in Cleveland. How does that change his look there? Can only be better than what it has been, because before this, 6, 1, and 5 points. So change is welcome for David Njoku owners. Tank Dell 0 for 4 here. Justin Tucker, 13 points, in Philadelphia 17. Looking on his bench, a couple interesting names. One we already talked about, Jaylen Warren, 12 carries, 44 yards. Interesting little flex play, I would say. He's involved, 51% of snap count, so you like to see that. And Nick Chubb in his return, only 11 carries for 22 yards, but does get in the end zone here. 36% snap count. You have to believe that that's going to ramp.
Yeah.
You know,
Oh, yeah.
and he gets in the end zone there. They trust him there. He actually scored like twice or three times. I feel like two of them got called back for a penalty, but it finally gets in there. So, maybe we wrote off Alex a little dead before he died here. My main question for you is, if Dave Montgomery wasn't in Detroit, let's say he just magically disappeared, Jamar Gibbs, is he a top 5 draft pick?
Yeah. Oh,
Jameer
yeah.
Gibbs.
I think
Jameer Gibbs,
so.
not Jamar Gibbs.
I don't know that that's ever been too much of a question, at least for me. I mean, we know that he's got talent. We know that he's electric, and it's just having that second option there at the running game, kind of the lightning and the thunder. You're going to use the thunder toward the end of the game when you're salting things away, when you're trying to bust into the end zone. Um, and we've talked about this before. The fact that Alex has put so much investment into two Lions players, two really great players. We know the downsides of that. The upside of that is you're going to have weeks where they score 31 points and both of those guys just go off. I mean, 51 combined points for his two Lions leads him to victory in a close game here, relatively close with previously a 4-2 team.
Yeah, I mean, and Kareem Hunt, just talking about top 12 options going forward until at least Pacheco comes back. I mean, he's the top 15 running back as of right now, correct? I mean, with Pacheco being out?
I would assume so. I mean, he's had two back-to-back games of 18 or more fantasy points with more than 20 carries in both. So, running back 4 in week 5 and then running back 11 in week 7. So, yeah, I mean, you have
And
to start him.
and now we're talking about it. We were talking about in the preseason how this was so running back light. Now it's kind of, I'm not going to say running back heavy, but he has options. He has Nick Chubb, Jalen Warren, Gibbs, and Hunt. I mean, that's at this point in the season with all these injuries, that's something that some teams, most teams would like to have those sorts of options. So yeah, 2-5, still desperate straits, but moving in the right direction. And 137 is nothing to sneeze at for Alex's squad.
Yeah, DJ Moore on bye this week, in week 7. So you figure again, Caleb Williams getting better, that offense starting to gel a little bit more. He's going to be a weapon. You probably can't trust Tank Dell right now. I mean, a 0 in a game that Nico Collins did not play in. They are really in Nico Collins' absence. They are really relying on Joe Mixon in the running game, and that affects C.J. Stroud here, the quarterback for Alex's team. So the Texans, whether it's scheme, whether what the issue is, but they have really not been as dynamic as we expected them to be. I mean, I remember thinking when they made these acquisitions in the offseason that they're going to be one of the best offenses that we've seen in recent memory. I mean, could be just stars all over the field, putting up huge points, and they just haven't quite been that. So I don't know. I'm worried from that respect, but we'll see if Alex has enough to win a couple games and make it interesting.
But let's go over to the losing side here. 125, 4-3, Cockeysville Cox. Starting with the quarterback, Kyler Murray has a nice bounce back day. 20 points, 14 for 26, 145, a touchdown. Does run the ball for 64 yards and a touchdown as well. That's kind of what you like to see out of Murray. Having over 50 yards rushing, that really limits his floor. It says that he struggled, but 20 points is his third best game of the season. So if that's struggling, you'll take it every day. Josh Jacobs, 12 carries, 76 yards. Does get in the end zone through the air. Joe Mixon, 25 carries, 115 yards, 2 touchdowns. We were talking about it, I think it was last week where, you had the top tier running backs, and then it just fell off in the draft. And then those middle running backs now are really showing their worth. And Mixon, 3 of his 4 games that he's played, 25 points or more. So another huge day for him. Jamar Chase, 5 for 6, 55 yards and a touchdown. Uh, Debo Samuel played in this one, but then left early, was hospitalized, of course, 0 points. Uh, Starts Means here, Bub Means with that, really decimated Saints passing game, 3 for 5, 37 yards. Dalton Schultz, 1 for 2, 28 yards. Uh, Brian Robinson, 12 carries, 71 yards, and a touchdown. Kyrie Fairbairn, 12 points, and the Bills defense, 13. Looking at his bench, kind of what I want to talk about here. He didn't listen about the Amari Cooper hype, it would seem. Even though I did lose that bet, because he only had 66 yards, he did score a touchdown on this one. So I was close. He was about 20 yards away from his season best, but only 35% snap count does score a touchdown here. So as he gets more familiar with the playbook, I would believe that snap count's going to go up. And he looks to be a nice little piece for Brian here. Going forward, you're starting him over Means. If Debo is out for an extended period of time, you can slot him in there as well. Did have a couple people on bye. Justin Fields, didn't play in this one. So kind of I would say one of those teams that's very borderline. I would say that's the phrase I would use for Brian's team is borderline, because right now Kyler Murray, you need him to play as a number one quarterback. You need Debo not to be gone, and you need Amari Cooper to, build on his success with his first week with Buffalo. So, 4-3, but there's some questions here in terms of just injuries and really the bottom half of this roster. Where is he going to get production there?
Yeah, I think I may be a little bit more optimistic than you are. I like what I saw from Josh Jacobs being involved a little bit more in the passing game than he has been. I feel like recently he gets into the end zone for the second, wait, did he? Yeah, first time through the air. He only has one rushing touchdown. So I think if he can string together a few more games like this where he's well into double figures, he's got the Jags next week. Joe Mixon, continues to dominate the workload. Jamar Chase benefiting from that Bengals improved offense right now compared to the first few weeks of the season. He is the number one wide receiver in the league. Kind of surprisingly, he had a 36-point game against the Ravens that sort of maybe vaulted him up to the top of the list there. And then, yeah, definitely Brian Robinson has been, really kind of a pleasant surprise. He's in double digits consistently every week that he's played the season. 13 points this week, 13 in week 5, and 18 the week before that. So I like a lot of these guys. I think Cooper, definitely you like his. I mean, you're optimistic compared to his situation in Cleveland that he was in. You're optimistic that he's in a better offense here. So I still like a lot of this. By the way, Debo Samuel, I mean, I didn't even mention him. Ayuk is going to be out. So, until McCaffrey comes back, he's probably, going to get some more opportunities. And when he does come back, you got to think that Debo will be open a little bit more down the field if defenses have to stay honest with Christian McCaffrey.
And as long as McCaffrey's out, you have to think that he's going to be used out of the backfield as well. And we've seen that.
Yep.
He's kind of that Swiss Army knife. It says that he had pneumonia-like symptoms, so it doesn't look like there's going to be anything long-term. He looks like he's going to play next week. So definitely good news for Brian. The only reason I'm kind of concerned is going back to Brian Robinson, 38% snap count. Kind of weird in a blowout. You'd believe with the starting quarterback going out of this one, you thought that he'd get a little more run. I don't know exactly, was it Austin Eckler? Austin Eckler was at 41. And I know McNichols got some playing this one 25. So, you just want to see that a little more. You want to see it close to 60%, not 38. Just, I don't know. You just want to see more opportunities, more than 12 carries. Because he's doing a lot with it. He's just not getting that opportunity.
I think that's owed to the fact that he's returning from injury, missed last week's game. I think he'll be fine. I think they just, wanted to ease him back in after his injury, but I think he'll be just fine.
Okay. So 4-3, not too worried about Brian. Still a very talented roster. I think it just really depends on Kyler Murray. Needs to be better than number 7, but 20 points. You'd like to see that. If he can continue that, very dangerous team, I believe, especially with everything going on around the league. Brandon Ayuk being out, Brad Robinson coming back to form. Definitely a team you do not want to face going forward.
Real quick, if you're Brian and you're looking at Kyler, who's been kind of mixed bag in terms of his results this year, going up against 3 straight defenses that are matchup nightmares for the quarterback position: Miami, Chicago, and the Jets. Are you looking at like a Bo Nix or a Kirk Cousins or a Matthew Stafford or a Drake May or a Jameis Winston, or a Russell Wilson? These are all quarterbacks that are on that are free agents right now on the waiver wire for this week. Are you playing the matchups with a waiver wire guy, maybe instead of just automatically throwing Kyler in there?
I don't think so. I think that's a little too extreme. Just with the amount of rushing that he should be doing, and I believe that 7 carries is usually around his norm. I think that just keeps the floor pretty high compared to those other quarterbacks where you might, have a 5-point day. I don't think we're really going to be seeing many 5 to 9-point days out of Kyler Murray just because of the rushing. I think his upside is a lot higher than those quarterbacks. I think you have to keep playing him no matter what the matchup is. Just because if they're behind and, they're playing from behind the game script, he's running the ball. He's going to drop back to pass, but he's going to scramble, maybe can bust out a big run. So I think you keep on playing him going forward. Okay. Cool. Let's go to our next matchup. Who's that going to be? That is going to be my matchup, unfortunately. Westminster Wonder Boys goes to 3-4 against my pitiful Union Bridge Barracudas. It's 2-5, 113.02 to 54.84. Let's go start with Scott's squad. Josh Allen has a fine day, 21 of 33, 323, 2 touchdowns. I think runs the ball 3 times, but didn't really need to do much against a pitiful Titans team. Bijan Robinson, 21 carries, 103 yards, and a touchdown. Snap percentage, 68%. You like to see that. Much higher than the last 2 weeks. Tank Bigsby. I was actually up watching this game. I could not believe, that this was happening to me. 26 carries, 118 yards, 2 touchdowns. Probably his best game of the season, even going forward, I would say. Tyler Lockett, 4 for 6, 45 yards. Interesting play with DK Metcalf going out. How much value does he have? Will be interesting to see. Terry McLaurin, 6 for 6, 96, or 98 yards, rather. Jared Jeudy in his first game without Amari Cooper, 1 for 5, 18 yards. So not the main beneficiary there. Maybe quarterback change helps him as well. Sam Laporta, just, snap percentage 95%, but only 2 targets on the day. 1 catch, 25 yards. Michael Pittman, 3 for 5, 63. Jake Elliott, 4 points, and the Colts with 10. Looking at his bench here, Rachaad White. We've been crapping on him this entire season, but scores 2 touchdowns through the air, 26 points, 10 carries, 40 yards, 6 for 6, 71. And Keon Coleman, 4 for 7, 125 as well. So some interesting, decisions to be made here, I would say. With Travis Etienne probably coming back this week, you have Jared Jeudy still struggling. Are you trusting White and Coleman to reinsert back into the lineup after their good weeks?
White for sure. I mean, White kind of quietly, we stopped talking about him in the last couple weeks because he's actually been a lot better than we're used to seeing. After being 2.8 or fewer yards per carry in the first three, he's four or more yards per carry in each of his last three games. So maybe turning it around a little bit, consistently a 10 carry guy, but involved in the passing game. Catches six of his six passes for 71 yards and two touchdowns against Baltimore this week. I like they have a lot of names. It's kind of a three-headed backfield right now. Bucky Irving looked really good last night as well, but White's role is pretty safe in terms of being a pass-catching running back. So I think you get him back into the lineup to go along with you're starting Bigsby as long as Etienne is out. You're obviously starting Bijan Robinson, so your flex might be taken care of. And then the question for me is, are any of these bench receivers more trustworthy than the guys in the starting lineup at wide receiver? McLaurin is a lock to start. Judy, has an opportunity now, potentially with Jameis Winston, to become a viable fantasy option here. And at least for the moment, if Tyler Lockett is going to be the number one right now, if DK Metcalf misses time, whether it's a week or two, Tyler Lockett certainly looks to benefit there. So, Scott's pretty sitting okay here, 3-4, number 9 in the standings. Next week we'll be at full strength, and at least based on the names that I just talked about, I think he can field a pretty solid enough team to try to get his record evened out to 4-4 in week 8.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you with White. You have to start him because of the dynamics of the Tampa Bay offense right now. You have Godwin out, you have Evans out. They're going to be running the ball, and he's going to catch the ball a ton out of the backfield, you have to imagine. This is one of these offenses that maybe you can trust three of them now because, I feel like they're just going to run the ball now. They have no experienced pass catchers other than Kate Otten, I would say. Who had a nice day, really in garbage time, but you have to think they're going to lean on the run, and the most trusted runner in that backfield right now is White. And like you said, he's going to save himself with a lot of this, out of the backfield passing stats. So I think he's an automatic insert into the lineup. But my question to you is, I think you're starting Coleman over Judy. Maybe that's a question. Judy has Baltimore next week.
I don't.
Coleman has Seattle next week. Who are you starting there?
Man, I don't know. I mean, we just talked about the situation for Amari Cooper, how he only played, what was it, 30 some percent of the snaps, in his first week with Buffalo. I got to think that his snap percentage going up might come at the expense of a guy like Keon Coleman. Shakir is still relevant in this offense, 7 for 7 this week. I don't know. I'm a little bit down on Coleman right now, so I don't trust it yet.
So my other question would be Pittman or Coleman.
Boy, the upside you got. As long as Richardson is starting, I guess the upside of Coleman is maybe more worth it.
Yeah, just Michael Pittman is a different player with Joe Flacco than he is with Anthony Richardson at this point in Richardson's career. Richardson
Terrible.
is just like horrible efficiency. You're seeing like 10 completions for 25 passes. It's just really bad efficiency, which hurts all the pass catchers there in Indianapolis. So just an interesting little thing. It's just like you have some locks here that you're always playing, at least playing for the near future, Tank Bigsby being one of them. But then you just have questions there with Judy, Pittman and Coleman, trying to pick the right player there. Even, I guess, Ray McLeod you can throw in there as well. Which one of those players is going to go off week in, week out? And can you pick the right one to put in your starting lineup and, forget the rest? How are you going to manage that, I guess you would say. My last thing is Sam Laporta. Yeah.
Just real quick on Bigsby, you mentioned him. One concern, week 8, Green Bay, good matchup. Then it goes Philadelphia, Minnesota, Detroit, Houston, Tennessee, New York Jets. 6 teams in a row who are deep red when it comes to defense against the running back. So a lot of tough sledding ahead for Bigsby. As long as he can stay ahead of Etienne, whether by injury or by just performance alone, that's great. But you got to think that Jacksonville might be in for some tough situations against some of those really good defenses.
My last thing for Scott's squad, Sam Laporta, now
Yeah.
tight end number 20. And this was a very, very close game. It just doesn't look like Jared Goff's looking for him. And it could have been like the same like scenario that Mark Andrews is kind of going through in the beginning of the season where they're keeping him in as a blocker to really get that run game going. But just, his most targets in a game is 5, and that's week 1. So, and the one play that he had last week, the one catch he had was on a flea flicker. So it's like a nice little like trick play that they ran that he scored a touchdown on. So I don't know. I mean, you drafted him very early. You got to just trust that he gets back on schedule because you can't really, there's no really better options out there. But, that's just really concerning for Scott. And that could really torpedo his entire season if he doesn't get back on track.
Yeah, it's Andrews, but worse. Like it's gone on. It's continued.
Yeah, that's right. All right, but let's go over to my team that I don't want to talk about at all. Jaden Daniels goes out of this one with a rib injury, two completions, 6 yards. Doesn't run for 50 yards, so gives me 5 points. Jordan Mason, 14 carries, 58 yards. Just a blah day against a tough defense. Tony Pollard, 16 carries, 61 yards. Little involvement in the passing game. Malik Neighbors, that Philadelphia defense was destroying Daniel Jones the entire game. 4 for 8, 41 yards. Mike Evans, his one catch was a touchdown, but now he is out for multiple weeks. He was actually my highest scorer, which is really sad to say, with one catch with a touchdown. Deontay Johnson, one catch, 17 yards. Just horrible game against Washington. Trey McBride, 5 for 7, 51. Surprisingly, tight end number 5. I thought he was doing way worse, but he's tight end number 5. Raheem Mostert, 11 carries, 50 yards, does lose a fumble here. Chase McLaughlin, doesn't miss a 50-yard field goal all year. Now this is one against Baltimore. And the Saints defense puts a 2-pointer against a plus matchup against Denver. Looking at my bench, did have a couple people on bye or hurt. Rico Dowdle, Chris Olave hurt. Calvin Ridley, who you're aware of, 5 points, and Brock Purdy, who is now going to be starting for me for the foreseeable future while Jaden Daniels is out. Interesting little note. I don't even know if Josh even knows this or not, but I did have a trade proposal sent to Josh for Brock Purdy for Brandon Ayuk. I'm glad I canceled that one.
Oh God.
I did it on Saturday, so I'm glad you didn't see it because if you would have accepted that would have been real bad. But yeah, I mean, I'm at 2-5. It's looking bleak here, and my top really players, my top producers are now going to be out multiple weeks, so nothing really to be happy about here. Also 2-5 on the season.
Yeah, boy, you've been so good in this league for so long. You always have like one of the best records. I think you have our current all-time winning percentage or something like that, except for maybe a team that played like a year or two because the stats are biased against you there. But like maybe you were due for some like negative regression in your record. I don't know. We both liked your team coming out of the draft. Just like really super unfortunate. And as you said, a lot of these guys left games early, and that is like the worst situation, right? Even a guy that's injured that tries to play. We always talk about how that is like the worst of all possible worlds because then you start him and he's a decoy. The same goes the opposite way. When you have a guy that's playing that gets hurt early, like Daniels, you just cannot sustain that, especially for a couple of your best players in 1 week. Then there's like Deontay Johnson, who, they're down the game script for that game when they lose this one 7-40 to Washington. That's like you should see Deontay Johnson getting 10 targets and garbage time over 150 yards. That's the kind of game that good receivers on bad times get in garbage time. He goes 1 for 3 for 17 yards. So like that sucks. I mean, Mostert maybe can get it going. Like at least you're holding on to some hope that he can maybe save your season by becoming like a I don't know, like what he was last year. Um, maybe regaining some of that
I
magic.
I
But
mean,
I
I
don't
will
know. I
say that
mean,
like Tua coming back does give you a little bit of hope, just because the offense without him is so bad, and when they have him, it's so good. So maybe he can get 15 touches in a game and do something with it. Um, but yeah, it's just if you said before the season that my season rests on Raheem Mostert, I'd be very concerned. So uh, yeah, I'm still concerned now.
well, and if you would have told me that you were picking up Calvin Ridley from free agency, from waivers or wherever, I think you did even make it to did even go through on waivers, or were you just able to get him in free agency?
Let me check.
Ridley
I
a
try
couple
to
days ago, I noticed that.
I try to not think about this team at all. I added him for free agency, so nothing,
Yeah,
no money.
no interest in Ridley, who was a what seventh rounder for me, seventh rounder. Yeah, just goes to show, desperation here. Malik Neighbors, rough game. The big thing to note there is that the Giants lost tackle Andrew Thomas, offensive tackle, who is by far the cog that keeps that offense turning when it actually does turn. Daniel Jones will be under a lot more pressure now. Neighbors, certainly will take a hit there from less time for Daniels to throw the ball. Yeah, just totally rough. Daniels, by the way, Jaden Daniels probably gonna. I meant Daniel Jones with the Giants, but Jaden Daniels, what, probably gonna miss a few weeks here, it seems.
Yeah, this is very much a
Do you have
death for
another
week 8.
option?
Yeah, Brock Purdy.
Yeah, Brock Purdy. Okay, so at least there you're pretty well covered, um, with some plus matchup against Dallas, Tampa Bay, Seattle coming up. Bye in week 9, so you might have to figure out a third quarterback to bring in for week 9 if Daniels is not back. But yeah, rough. I don't know. What would you set the percentage of you making the playoffs right now, sitting at number 11?
10%.
10%. Okay,
Um, I
10%.
I just feel like they've been real. All my players have been really underperforming. Um, I don't believe that's going to happen all season. I do believe that I'm going to be able to squeak out a couple more wins, but I have a feeling that I'm a 5-win team. That's kind of where I'm thinking I'm going to end up being. So, yeah, just not good, and I don't want to talk about it anymore. And when you see my
We can move on.
well, yeah, they already saw the video that I did for my shotgun. So hope you were all entertained by that. Pat has not seen it yet, but
I have not seen it.
let's go over. I guess we're gonna go over to your matchup here. Going through
Mhm.
here, um, that would be the Westminster Warbirds going to 5-2. I think you're tied for the best record in the league against Jake, the Carlisle Cheddar, 108.74 to 93.20. As you mentioned, the championship matchup from last year. Let's go over the matchup. Joe Burrow, kind of off day. 15 for 25, 181, 2 touchdowns. You were expecting a little more with how close it was. Just hoping for 30 to 35 passing attempts to really get those numbers up. James Cook, in his limited action here, because they were so far ahead, 12 carries, 32 yards, and a touchdown. Kyron Williams, really, like, I would say that he's probably the most unknown running back, that, like, how well he's doing. Like, no one's talking about him, about how good he's been. Double-digit points in all of his games, has a 19-point game here, 21 carries, 76 yards, and 2 touchdowns on the day. Josh Downs, you start here, 1 for 3, 3 yards. Nothing really happening there. Juju Smith-Schuster doesn't play in this one. Did you? No, he did play in this one. He went out.
He played. Yeah, he left.
He left in this one
Hamstring.
with a 0-pointer. A.J. Brown, though, 5 for 5, 89 yards and a touchdown. Having, really nice, games coming back from the injury. Number one option there in Philadelphia. Pat Fryermuth, 2 for 3, 51. Chua Hubbard. I'm guessing Brooks didn't play in this one. No, he did not. I
He did
think he
not.
might be expected next week, but 17 carries, 52 yards, and a touchdown. McManus with the new team with Green Bay hits the game winner, 7.5, and Denver with 22 points against the Saints. Couple of interesting players of note. Ray Davis, 5 carries, 41, touchdown. Um, 2 straight weeks, double-digit points. They like him there in Buffalo. How much does he cut into James Cook's production? Jonathan Brooks, as we mentioned, should come back this week. I'm hearing so much feedback from you right now. Um, uh, Jonathan Brooks should be interesting to see how he comes back. Uh, Bucky Irving, 9 carries, 23 yards, and a touchdown. You sit Jalen Waddle here, which was kind of interesting to me. Um, just putting Josh Downs over Waddle. Only catches one ball here, so it didn't really matter. Shakir, your trade acquisition, 7 for 7, 65 yards. And Christian Watson, nothing doing there against Houston. Uh, you know, 5-2, very solid, but you do have some you do have some questions here. I'm assuming when Hawkinson plays, you're not starting Fryermuth anymore. Is that correct? To summarize.
We'll need to see it for a week. To first week back, probably not going to start Hawkinson, but hopefully thereafter.
Okay. And what was your reasoning behind starting Josh Downs over Jalen Waddle here?
I mean, have you looked at the last several weeks of scores for those two guys? I think it was a pretty obvious decision.
Okay.
Obviously Downs did that with Flacco, but you have to remember Josh Downs had a late start to the season, so really had not played very much with Richardson, hoping that he would be able to continue his sort of hot streak. 3 weeks, I believe, it was three weeks in a row, yeah, of over 10 fantasy points. 11, 16, and 18. 9 targets or more in each of the last 3 games compared to Waddle, who has just been awful. Miami has not been able to figure it out into his absence. He's wide receiver number 68. So it was an easy decision this week. It'll probably be an easy decision the opposite way next week, as long as Tua plays. I think Waddle will be inserted directly right back into one of those starting wide receiver spots. And yeah, we'll see where it goes. I mean, nice to get a win here. It was a close one. It started out kind of crazy on Thursday night with 22 points for me from the Broncos defense, and a rough night for Kamara and a rough night for Blake Grupe on Jake's side. So it was looking kind of lopsided after the first game of the week. Obviously, the wide receiver position is the biggest question mark. I've done a lot of jostling in the last 3 to 4 weeks at trying to line up some wide receivers, trying to catch lightning in a bottle, after a good performance from some of these guys. It hasn't worked out. It didn't work out this week. Downs and Smith-Schuster, the injury obviously to Juju hurts a little bit. But things potentially looking up. Christian Watson didn't do much here, but I still think he could be a plug and play kind of bye-week replacement guy with high upside. Khalil Shakir, 7 for 7, 65 yards, might still be usable, might be droppable. We'll have to wait and see. And then Waddle is the big one. Getting Tua back will make a huge difference. This is a guy that I think you even said he was one of your favorite picks of the draft, maybe in the 4th round. So, hopefully they're able to get that rapport back relatively quickly. Not a very high score here, 108. I know it doubled your team, but, expecting some higher scores here in the next couple weeks.
All right, my last question for your team is: you're one of the few teams that has this issue, so it's interesting. It's an interesting question. Who are you more concerned about in terms of the backups? Ray Davis to James Cook, or Jonathan Brooks to Chua Hubbard?
I'm certainly more concerned about Brooks. And we've talked about it in the last couple shows, is those guys could just cancel each other out. I mean, Brooks has a lot of upside and talent and ability. I think was he the first running back taken in the draft or something like that, I think, or was one of the first couple. So huge upside, but Hubbard has been playing so well. He has really held the fort down. He's getting the work. He's doing a lot with it. He's been mostly involved in the passing game, although 0 targets this week in just a weird game script game
Yeah.
for the Panthers. Don't know what that was, but definitely more concerned about a potential timeshare in Carolina. I think Cook, as long as he's healthy, will be the guy. Davis has certainly looked good and could step in. I don't know that Cook was fully healthy in this one. I think he did play, but 53 percent of snaps, not really unusual for him, but did get only 12 opportunities to carry the ball.
Yeah, I mean, I think I kind of agree. You have to be more concerned with Chuo Hubbard. He doesn't have the track record, I would say. Last year he was pretty bad. This year has been good, but I think, we kind of talked about this last week. Carolina, where they are in terms of an organization and team, I think they're going to want to see what Jonathan Brooks has when he comes in. So I think that it's very likely that they're going to split the work just to see what type of player Jonathan Brooks is. So that really could cancel each other out.
Yep. By the way, just last note on my team, you gave me some insider baseball earlier today with your trade offer that you revealed to us. I will reveal that, while discussing, the Chase Brown Khalil Shakir trade with Sarah that I ultimately made, I had also been discussing a couple trades for with Brian, and that one of them, I was targeting Rashid Shaheed earlier, now out for the season, I believe, for the Saints. But I had initially offered Chase Brown for Rashid Shaheed, and when he turned that one down, I even said, I might consider Bucky Irving for Rashid Shaheed. So Brian turned both of those offers down. Sarah took me up on it and may have gotten a top 15 running back out of it. So kind of some insider info there on the running back situation. But Bucky Irving, definitely like him. He looks electric whenever he touches the
Yeah.
field. There's competition
He
for
had a,
carries there,
he
but
had a crazy run against the Rays where he started on one side of
yeah,
the field and ended on the other side. It was pretty
yep,
nuts.
totally. And you got to think, just put this into perspective. If Evans is going to miss a week or two or more,
They said
Godwin's going to
4.
miss the rest of the season. What are you going to do? You're going to get the ball to your most electric playmakers, and that includes Bucky Irving, and it includes Rashad White, and it probably includes
Sean
McMillan, the wide
and Sean
receiver.
Tucker.
So, um, yeah, maybe. I think Bucky still looks like the best running back there. He's undersized, so there's injury concerns, but he looks really electric.
Okay, but let's go over to Jake Swan now 4-3. I think he's lost a couple games in a row here. Starting with Jordan Love, has an okay day. 24 for 33, 220 yards, 3 touchdowns. Does throw 2 picks, which limit his ceiling. Saquon Barkley in the revenge game against the Giants, 17 carries, 176 yards and a touchdown. Could have had a lot more if Jalen Hurts didn't steal those 2 goal line touchdowns from him, which I was concerned about a little bit during the preseason. I don't know if you remember that, but I was a little bit concerned about that. Obviously, Saquon Barkley is top 5 running back material. But that does limit his monster games that he can have with Jalen Hurts stealing the goal line work. Alvin Kamara, that Saints offense as a whole just looked real bad. Spencer Rattler looks awful. Kamara did absolutely nothing. 7 carries, 10 yards, 6 or 7, 14. Really down game here. Last 3 games, 19, 14, 5. As these Saints get more and more hurt, does that kind of put the focus on him for defenses exclusively? It's hey, we're going to stop Alvin Kamara, and we're going to let everyone else try to beat us. That could be a problem, especially with Olave and Shaheed out of this one, and David Carr, mind you. Garrett Wilson, 5 for 9, 61 yards, 2-point conversion. Starts also Devontae Adams, so the Jets duo, 3 for 9, 30 yards there. Jalen Reed, 2 for 4, 10 yards. Now wide receiver number 5, so still doing fine there, but had a big week 1. Then went 11, 11, 2, 5, 8. So kind of up and down. And this is kind of what we talked about with the Packers wideouts here. There's 4 of them. Really, if you're not counting the tight ends as well. This is just one of those games where he didn't get the looks. So hard to trust there for Jalen Reed. Kyle Pitts, though, 7 for 9, 65 yards. Now tight end number 6 on the season.
Yay.
Tyrone Tracy, we said he got he has the job, but only 6 for 23 that whole game. Like the Carolina game was just real bad for the Giants and Carolina. Group has 4 and Pittsburgh has 9. Looking on his bench, not really much to talk about here. Zach Moss, 5 points. Algier, 5. I think it's Trey Tucker. Yeah, Trey Tucker, 6. Mike Williams, 2. And Jameson Williams has only .10, and they're talking about a 2-game suspension for him for PED. So he's going to miss the next 2. How does that shape, Jake's squad? You had to start Wilson and Adams, I'm guessing, but it doesn't give a lot of wiggle room for that wide receiver 3 and flex position for the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, it doesn't. I think you're still starting Jaden Reed just because of the upside that he offers. That was a pick that I think maybe that might have been the most controversial pick in the draft, according to our draft recap podcast, where we really did not like that pick in the 6th round. As you mentioned, his numbers are a little bit misleading. He's the number 5 wide receiver, but he's really doing that on the back of week 1 with a 31-point fantasy game and week 4 with a 23-point fantasy game. All other weeks he's been under 12 fantasy points. He hasn't been inside of the top, basically 24. He's been in the top 24 twice this season. I guess 3 times. One of those was 24 and hasn't done it since week 4. So, I think you have to still start him, but for sure that flex position with Jameson Williams being suspended potentially for 2 games, that does call into question who are you going to start there? Tyrone Tracy, I think a little bit of his 67% snap share was a little bit of Singletary coming back from injury. I think that will maybe shift back to Singletary next week, if not be a 50-50 at worst for sure there. So I'm not sure that Tracy's the answer. Moss and Algier, 5 and 6 and 5 carries respectively. Not sure that's the answer. Mike Williams, maybe you hope that he gets traded to a wide receiver desperate team.
KC.
Like if you put Mike Williams in, exactly what I was about to say. Maybe that's something that you trust, but definitely a hole right now at the flex spot.
Yeah, I mean, this Jameson Williams news, it really comes at the worst time for Jake, I would say, because, you could really just plug and play him at the flex spot. You're hoping for that big bomb that he usually catches, every other week. But, again, this is a very top-heavy team where you have Saquon, Kamara, and then I would throw Garrett Wilson in there as well. But, it's a lot of question marks here. Devontae Adams is only 1 week here, but does have 96% snap count. So, Rodgers is just having problems getting him the ball. And it looks like he's having trouble just getting anyone the ball. Only 15 points in this one. They're better than that. I just don't know how that synergy is really going to... If it's too little too late for, this season. They didn't get a full, all season together. They've been gone from each other, for a couple seasons. So, does it turn around? He has New England next week, Houston, and Arizona. So some good matchups there. But, you got to see it. And how we feel about having, 2 top options on the same team. It's very dangerous because if that offense struggles, you have 2 people that just struggled. So just something to be concerned about going forward for Jake. And not a lot of help on the bench. I mean, Moss lost his job. Tyler Algier never had the job. Only gets 5 carries in this one. 23% snap count as well. So trending in the wrong direction there. You're just hoping Mike Williams gets traded, I guess, or something happens. You're not hoping for injuries, but an injury to Bijan Robinson would really skyrocket Tyler Algier's value. So, it's just 4-3, but question marks galore, I would say.
Yeah, Jake reminded me during this game that this isn't the first time that he live or dies by Aaron Rodgers hitting Devontae Adams for touchdowns. He's obviously a Packers fan, so that happened many times in Green Bay, and even outside of that, Jake tends to draft his Packers guys, both former and current. Judging by his current roster and other rosters in other leagues for many years. So. Yeah, it'll be an interesting situation to watch. The role that Wilson and Adams can play. I'm a little bit concerned that Jets offense just maybe doesn't have another gear to get into. I
Yeah.
think they might be capped. Um, I don't know what it is exactly, but if it's going to take a few weeks for this situation to sort of resolve itself, Jake could be in for some disappointing results while they try to get it figured out.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree. Well, let's go over to our last matchup of Week 7. That's going to be the Reisterstown Rockets going to 5-2, 106.86 to 92.20. Columbia Clown College now 1-6 on the season. Let's start with Charlie's squad here. Start Sam Darnold here, and it's always been a question of Sam Darnold or Carr, I think, but Carr didn't play in this one. Does he still have him on the roster? I'm not positive.
Off the roster.
All right, so Sam Darnold it is. Scores 16 points, 259 yards passing, a touchdown, interception. J.K. Dobbins, 14 carries, 40 yards, 3 for 3, 26. You were kind of hoping that with a Greg Roman style offense that, J.K. Dobbins would be a top, 12 kind of running back here. Kind of been disappointing after the first 2 weeks, 6, 7, and then he has a 17-point day, but then also 8. You're expecting a little more out of that offense as a whole, especially J.K. Dobbins, how well he looked early in the season. Cannot be. It's not the same thing with Derrick Henry though. 15 carries, 169 yards, and catches his only pass for a touchdown, 24 points. The most dominant running back so far in fantasy football. Devontae Smith, 1 for 2, -2 yards. Jackson Smith and Jigba, also a kind of interesting name if DK Metcalf does miss some time. 3 for 6, 9 yards. Alan Lazard, even with Wilson and Devontae Adams being there, does go 4 for 4, 58 yards. Dalton Kincaid, nothing really happening. 3 for 6, 52. Javonte Williams, though, 14 carries, 88 yards, 2 touchdowns. He looked pretty good on Thursday. I thought he did. So he has a stranglehold on that rushing attack. He's at 60% snap count at least. Has the majority of the carries. Ran for 6.2 yards per carry in this one. Chris Boswell, 13 points, and Falcons defense scores 1 point. On the bench, he has Tucker here, Sean Tucker, 5 carries, 29. Nothing really happening there. Only going to be really viable if one of those two, Bucky Irving or Rachaad White, get hurt. Again, Leggett here, we're talking about Carolina, that just game script that didn't make sense. Doesn't make sense here either. 2 for 3, 3 yards. Cooper Kupp didn't play in this one. I know there was some talk that he might play. Jacoby Myers didn't play as well. And Demario Douglas, nothing doing there over there in London. What's my question for? Does have Jonathan Taylor out? What's his status here? Hopeful to practice this week, so he might be getting some help there, even more help with the running back position here. So you have 4 running backs here. You have J.K. Dobbins, Derrick Henry, Javonte Williams, and Jonathan Taylor. Who are you sitting the first week when Jonathan Taylor comes back? Let's say he comes back this week. Which one of those? You're obviously starting Henry, but I guess the other 3 are questions.
It'll depend on the confidence level that Jonathan Taylor will come back and have a full complement of snaps. I think you just have to follow the reporting from practice throughout the week to figure out whether you think he's going to be limited. I think I would probably play the matchups and between Dobbins and Williams, whoever has the better matchup, I think I would start at this point. I'm not ready to crown Javonte Williams as some fantasy savior here. I've got him in another league. Trust me, I hope that is the case. But it is his first top 10 finish of the season, 24 fantasy points, his first 2 rushing touchdowns of the season. So, I'm not ready. I mean, now Carolina is next week, and we saw what the Commanders just did to Carolina. Yeah. So, without even looking at Dobbins' matchup, I think I'm going Javonte.
Okay. So Javonte has Carolina, and J.K. Dobbins has New Orleans, who Javonte Williams just ran all over.
Oh,
So
wow. Okay, so that's interesting then. Yeah, we'll see.
yeah, so yeah, that's an interesting
Yeah.
decision for Charlie to have. Um, my other question is Jackson Smith and Jigba. Let's say that. Oh, let me make sure that before I start talking about this, that yeah, DK Metcalf is considered week to week, so he's probably going to miss week 8 against Buffalo. I mean, Jackson Smith and Jigba will top 25 play against Buffalo next week. Is that so far to say?
No, yeah, that's totally fine. Especially with the upside factor there. I think that's totally fine. Demario Douglas didn't do much in this one, but we have more confidence in Drake May than how they performed in this game. Some tough matchups coming down the pike for him. So yeah, I mean, in terms of who to start, I think you're definitely keeping Smith and Jigba in there as long as Metcalf misses for sure. And then the rest of it, look, I mean, Charlie steals this win with some really terrible wide receiver play, but it's because there's injuries and bye weeks that are plaguing him right now.
Yeah.
I have a bold prediction. Just looking up and down this team, as you've been talking, I've just kind of been scrolling up and down and thinking about this and thinking about this. I'm going to make a bold prediction and say Charlie wins this league.
Ooh.
How's that for a bold prediction? Charlie is now in second place, tied with me for the best record in the league. He's got Nico Collins on IR. He's got Jacoby Myers in a situation where he could be the number one wide receiver for a team that's probably going to be throwing a lot in with the Raiders. He's got Cooper Kupp coming back from injury. He's got Jonathan Taylor coming back from injury. He's got Javante Williams, maybe resurgence. We'll see. Um, he's got Derrick Henry, who's just playing out of his mind at
Yeah.
age 30. He's got J.K. Dobbins, who, as long as he's healthy, the results have been a little bit mixed since the first 2 weeks against good matchups, but he's still a fantasy startable commodity. And, Darnold is going to get Hawkinson back, so I expect that offense to keep humming. Um, Charlie's sitting at 4-2 or 5-2 now with the injuries that he has and guys that he's going to get back. Boy, yeah, it's going to be tough to contend with.
I have a funny bold prediction. I didn't even know you were going to say that, so that's very funny. My bold prediction is that in week 8 he scores the league low in points.
Oh, has he got some bye week issues? Oh,
No,
next week.
I
Oh,
just
there's
think
no bye weeks.
yeah,
There are
I
no
just
bye
think that
weeks.
next week
Oh, wow. Okay.
Derrick Henry has a hard
Interesting.
matchup in terms of Cleveland. I think Cleveland can stop the run. Now, can they stop Derrick Henry? Who knows? No one has been able to as of yet. Um, I just have a feeling. I don't know why. Just because the fantasy football is so stupid. I think he's going to have the league low in points next week, and we're going to see a shotgun video out of Charlie. So congratulations, Charlie, on your league high in points next week. Because if my bold predictions have proven anything, is that I am wrong. So congratulations on that. The last thing on Charlie is interesting to see. Uh, Cooper Kupp could play this week. They play on Thursday, so it is a short week. But he practiced in full today, so he could see him back this week. Now, how much work he's going to have, do they want to ramp? That remains to be seen. But if he's playing, you have to assume that you're starting him.
Yes.
Okay, let's go over to our last team and our worst record in the league. That would be the Columbia Clown College, 1-6, 92.20.
Yeah, before you start, let me start with a not so bold prediction, and that's that Mike is not going to win this league.
Okay.
Is that fair to say?
That's fair to say. But looking at his squad, 1-6, really desperate straits. Probably have to win out. No room for error anymore. And just with this squad, just looking at it, there are some, maybe positives here. Who knows? Maybe it could be a nice playable spoiler against some of these top teams. But Jared Goff, playing out of his mind right now. I think it's Lamar and him are really 1 and 2 in the MVP race right now. Surprising enough as it is. 22 of 25, 280, 2 touchdowns through the air. Solid 18 points. Aaron Jones, 14 carries, 93 yards and a touchdown. 3 for 3 for 23. James Conner has a nice day. 19 carries, 101 yards. 51 yards through the air. Tyreek Hill, what are you going to do? I mean, they have no quarterback there in Miami. Tua's coming back. Way better days ahead coming back now. Marvin Harrison, just very inconsistent for a rookie. Did get knocked out of week 7, maybe coming back. he had a concussion, so shouldn't really be any dip in production, but does have a dip here, 3 for 6, 21. Christian Kirk dropped a touchdown pass in this one, 1 for 3, 24 yards. He didn't really drop it, he just stepped out of bounds before he came in bounds. So Travis Kelce, 4 for 5, 17. You have to assume at some point that they'll just get him going. But now, or tight end number 16 on the season, Travis Kelce. I don't know if we would ever utter those words, even, how old he is. Jordan Addison, 3 for 4, 66. Koo goes for 2, and Seattle goes for 16. Looking at his bench, some interesting names, sort of, I guess. Rashad Bateman, 4 for 4, 121, a touchdown. He seems like the deep threat there in Baltimore. It seems like Zay Flowers is the underneath guy, and Bateman's kind of the over-the-top guy. Does this continue? I don't believe so. This is his best game of the season. I could see this being the best game of his season. But, as on your team, you like to see it. Austin Eckler, really nothing happening in this one as well. Seems to be Brian Robinson's job. Darius Slayton, nothing with Malik Neighbors coming back. Isaiah Likely, the big spend in week 1, nothing with Mark Andrews really taking on that role. Dak Prescott on bye. But what I want to talk about with Mike's team is these 3 wide receivers. Okay, Tyreek Hill, Harrison, and Kirk. Okay, Tyreek is not wide receiver number 43. Does he end the season as a top 10 wide receiver?
End the season as a top 10 receiver?
Yep.
No, but like on a points per game basis for the rest of the way, for sure. I mean, obviously.
Does he end top 20?
I don't know that. Yeah, top 20. Probably he'll catch back up to top 20. Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Marvin
He
Harrison.
could do that in 2 weeks.
Yes, true.
Like literally, seriously.
Marvin Harrison, number. Or you want to talk on Tyreek for a sec?
No.
Going to Marvin Harrison,
Not really.
wide receiver number 28. Does he finish as a top 20 wide receiver?
I mean, probably. Probably still has his bye left in week 11. Some decent matchups towards the end of the season. So I would say yeah.
Okay. And Christian Kirk, wide receiver number 44. Green Bay, Philadelphia, Minnesota, Detroit. Not good matchups at all. I'll keep with the theme. Does he finish as a top 30 wide receiver at the end of the season?
Probably 30. Yeah, I mean, probably 30. I think he'll be better than he has been. I mean, he's had some really low weeks. He's, 0.4, 3.5, 2.9. Like, I think his floor should come up a little bit. Jacksonville maybe is going to make a coaching change at some point in the season. Of course, beating New England isn't doing very much for that.
Right.
They do have, I feel like they do have some decent matchups left on their schedule in terms of passing games that they probably will be losing. So I think top 30 is fine.
I mean, Christian Kirk, I know he's been there's been whispers about trade talks. Imagine him going to Kansas City. Like, where does that put him? Like,
yeah, oh yeah. Anybody right now going to Kansas City.
Well, that's true, but like in terms of teams that could be moving people, moving contracts because they're not where they are. Christian Kirk signed a big contract. I think it was 2 years ago. Would they want to move on from that money? Is a change in scenery what he needs? I think it is, but obviously not my money, not my decision. So just interesting little tidbits, I guess, to talk about Mike's team. But still talented. I mean, they're still talented players. It just some bad luck, and so with Tyreek Hill, it's not like he was hurt, but his quarterback got hurt, so that really tanked his value. And when your first round draft pick really tanks in value, is number 43 in their position, that's a recipe for no success.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, look, we all thought that this was, well, I thought, and I've said it already, that the problem spot for Mike's team was going to be the sort of the running backs and the age of the running backs, Aaron Jones and James Conner. Like, Aaron Jones was a little bit banged up, and just when you thought, okay, maybe, he's trending down, he comes back with a 19-point fantasy day, running at 6.5 yards a carry. Was questionable, I think, coming into the game, but has a 19-point fantasy game, and that's just a little bit more than the 16 that James Conner put up on 19 carries over 100 yards. So it's interesting that those guys who I thought would be sort of the weak spot, they were the strength of this team this week. It was the wide receivers, it was the tight end letting Mike down in this week 7 loss.
Where was Kelsey drafted? In the third round, third pick. So yeah, when you're 1-3 or doing this poorly throughout the season, 1-6 is not to be unexpected, I would say. And Marvin Harrison with the second round pick. I mean, he's wide receiver 28. Just kind of unlucky for Mike. Just with situations in terms of Travis Kelsey and quarterback play really for Tyreek and Marvin Harrison Jr. But that is
and I mean, kind of lucky that Goff has been like, I mean, kind of trending up, and currently quarterback 13. He was drafted as 4 rounds behind Prescott in the 7th. So Goff in the 11th round. Has put together 3 really good fantasy games, including 2 of 25 or more fantasy points. So, I think he's probably starting Goff over Prescott as the default, unless there's a serious matchup discrepancy. But, it's something to be said for Mike's draft that he went out and got a second quarterback that is now playing really well.
Okay, going over to the Week 8 matchups just real quick. I play you in Week 8. Lock of the week for you?
Oh, no. Come on, Adam. I couldn't do that to my fantasy karma. What are you doing?
All right, 2-5 versus 5-2. Westminster Warbirds versus Union Bridge Barracudas. La Carlisle Cheddar 4-3 against the Westminster Wonder Boys 3-4. The Orchard Beach Ovaries 4-3 versus 1-6 Columbia Clown College. Reisterstown Rockets 5-2 versus the Pink Pony Club 4-3. Pasadena Plague 4-3 versus the Cockeysville Cox 4-3, and Owings Mills Ogres 2-5 versus the Finksburg Freaks at 4-3. So that is our show, everyone. Thank you for listening as always, and we will see you in Week 8 for the results and all news, notes, fantasy analysis that you could ever ask for in the Beltway Wars Invitational. Goodbye, everybody.
See ya.
Thank you for listening and your support. If you enjoyed the show, please make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube and Spotify.